we do smart, efficient infrastructure. And so, again, Joe's done work all over the world, Urban 3. They've done it in 30 different states, Canada, New Zealand. So, you know, we've got 3 world-class keynote speakers that are here today. And if somehow your schedule doesn't allow you to watch them today, if you're watching at home, these are going to be available online for up to a year. And so we want to make sure that you get a chance to learn from these experts. We also got some incredible breakout sessions that are going to be going on in terms of investments in livability, future transportation, reimagining places using the arts, resilient community planning, and more. We've got our leadership. I want to give a shout out to Bill Panos, who's here from NDDOT. We've got a number of other cabinet leaders that are here, but make sure if you get a chance to go to those keynotes today, you'll get a chance to see people from the state of North Dakota, from our team that are here to help you build great communities in North Dakota. I want to start with a challenge, also, as I often do, to each of you, and this is really about today. You've chosen to spend time either watching from your office or from home to learn today, or you've committed to be here in person. I want to thank you, your employers, and others that supported you being here. But sometimes when we go to conferences, we go to a conference and we're like, hey, that's interesting. That was fun. I ran into some people. It was good to get out and get reconnected. And then when you get home, the ideas don't turn into action. So my challenge to all of you, if you're listening today, is to really be present today, to set aside this long list of tasks that you've got to do, and you're thinking about the things you got. You pick up kids, take care of parents, do your jobs, work on all these other things, text somebody back, send an email, I got to make a phone call. Try to take some time. You've invested being here today. I want to challenge all of you. If each of the people that are listening today, because between you and the folks that are online, it's probably approaching 1,000 people. If we have 1,000 people in our state that leave today with one action item of something they're going to do different in their communities, we will again start moving this Main Street initiative forward in a positive way, which will change the trajectory of your communities, the companies that are there, the families, and the children. So again, each of you can play an important part. You've made the first step to be here. So my challenge is leave today with a solid action item and then make it happen. The Main Street Initiative has got 3 pillars, and these have not changed at all since we began talking about this. Of course, the first is smart, efficient infrastructure, which I've talked about. Healthy, vibrant communities is the second, and 21st century workforce is the third. And I want to jump in with the fourth one, which we are now adding, which is economic growth and diversification. Sean mentioned this morning that there is and he mentioned it briefly, but the number he said is accurate. There are over $25 billion, with a B, $25 billion of capital that has expressed interest in coming to North Dakota to build significant value-added projects around value-added agriculture, like more soybean processing plants, like corn wet milling plants. There are value-added energy. We're talking about hydrogen. We're talking about carbon sequestration and storage. All of these things are adding up to over $25 billion. A lot of this has happened since May of this year, when we made the announcement that as a state, we wanted to reach a goal of carbon neutrality by 2030 without any mandates and without any new regulations. We can do that through innovation, and we can do it because we've got the gift of the Bakken, which has given so many resources to our state, built up our $8 billion legacy fund, built up our $6 billion foundation aid fund. The Bakken, well, it's a great resource for producing energy, turns out to also to have the perfect jackpot of geology for storing CO2. 7,000 feet below ground, we can store all of the CO2 that our nation produces for the next 50 years. You could produce all of the CO2 that North Dakota produces for the next 4,400 years, but I think we might have some new solutions before that. So in the short term, in the next 50 years, we have a great opportunity. In the next decade or two, as we transition to new forms of energy, we have an opportunity to decarbonize fuels, which will get us to the goals that we want for sustainability and the environment faster than almost any other way. So we've got a set of policies in North Dakota and a framework that allow us to do that. We're the first state in the nation to get primacy, meaning that we can decide the North Dakota state regulators can decide where and when to drill a carbon sequestration well without having to get federal approval to do that. We can guarantee these investors with their billions of dollars that if they come here that we can permit a project and it will happen. All of that stuff is then driving new interest in all these other value-added industries, from biodegradable plastics to more fertilizer production in our own state. We only produce about a third of the fertilizer we need. We don't produce all the propane we need. And for example, with the lack of natural gas infrastructure, we're at risk of losing a $750 million corn wet milling plant in Grand Forks because there's not enough natural gas for them there. They would choose to put their plant in Iowa next to the Northern Border Pipeline, and they would use North Dakota Bakken gas at their plant in Iowa with Iowa corn as opposed to using it here in North Dakota. So again, these three pillars that we talk about, smart infrastructure, healthy, vibrant communities that workforce and families want to stay in, and then in the workforce component, but this economic growth and diversification is critical. We've never been at a point where we are now. These projects are spread all across the state. If we landed all 25 billion of them, which we won't, but if we did, it would touch every single one of you in this room in all the communities we live in a way that would help us diversify our economy and get us off of these swings where we're attached to commodity prices we can't control. But each pillar plays a key role going forward. But today, again, we want to spend more time talking about smart, efficient infrastructure. And so we're going to let the classwork begin. We will start with a little brief history. In the history of civilization, humans always joined in communities. When they built communities going back to the Roman era and others, there was good city planning, there was smart use, and they built in a way where there was the right mix of private capital and public capital that made these things sustainable. After World War II in the United States, when a lot of the growth in our country occurred, there was a whole new pattern of development. And that pattern of development unfortunately, the pattern of development was not designed around people. The pattern of development was designed around automobiles. And with automobiles, we started to stretch our cities. The footprints got bigger and bigger. The infrastructure got more and more costly. The roads began small, and then they got wider and wider. And then we still build sidewalks next to those roads, but they hardly ever get used because everything is so far away. People have to drive. We've built car-dependent communities, and we do it all over the country. And then the federal government helped subsidize these arterials, as they're called, the big collector roads, like the ones you probably drove in, like here, like a Veterans or a Main Avenue, which is also US Highway 10. They receive federal dollars. And over time, those roads get bigger and wider. Even here in West Fargo, Main Avenue, the redevelopment about 4 or 5 years ago, we've got a 7-lane road on old US Highway 10, and then frontage roads on each side. So right here, within a mile of where we're sitting, we've got an 11-lane road. And you might say, well, that's really great that we've got an 11-lane road here in our little teeny community. But that road's got to get plowed. That road's got to get maintained. This infrastructure has a maintenance cost that just goes on and on forever. And who pays for that? It's not the city. It's all of you. It's the taxpayers. When you see those roads, open your eyes and go, I'm paying for this, and I'm paying for this road to be plowed. And is this the only way to do it, or is there a different way that we could do it? So we're not trying to criticize the past. We're trying to reinvent the future, but we have to look at what we've done and say, can we use it better? There was another thing that happened that occurred in our country around the industrial era, which is if you look at older cities in our country or older cities around the world, they had mixed uses. Even if you go back to the Roman cities, people had retail essentially below and they lived above. And then we came up with this thing called zoning, which was an American concept, single-use zoning, where we said, wow, industrial stuff is really dirty and workers shouldn't have to live by that, so we're gonna have an industrial park or an industrial zone here, and we're gonna have another thing which is called a suburban single-family home subdivision, and in that subdivision you can't put a coffee shop and you can't put a hair salon, you can't put a law office. So so when you again drive around and look, and you will see that our pattern of development, we have segregated all these uses. And then we'll say, well, here's a shopping mall, that's gonna be a retail area. Well, if you have retail here and you work here and you live there, what do you need? You need a car, and then your kids need a car, and your spouse needs a car, and your parents, if they can't drive anymore, they need help with transportation. And then we say, oh, we need public transportation. Well, it doesn't work because the distances are too far and there's not enough riders. So public transportation doesn't work in a sprawling, car-dependent community like ours. And then you say, well then, hey, well then what about other forms of transportation like walking or biking? Well, the distances become too far, and in our busy world, we can't make that work. But if you take a look at cities around the world that were built before cars, that still does work. People, they walk more, they bike more, and then by the nature of that, it's the reason it explains a big chunk of why Scandinavian countries and Northern European countries have better health outcomes than the US, because we have become a nation, when you're car dependent, then we have the things that normally would help your health. The nation spends $4 trillion a year on healthcare in our country. 1 trillion of the $1 trillion that we spend is related to health-related issues that would be solved not by a gym membership, not by some aggressive thing, not by some crazy diet, but by walking. Walking, the cardio effect of walking. We were all built to walk. Humans were meant to walk. And then, we've developed a culture here in North Dakota. If you cannot park by the front door, that's when you call your city commissioner and say, hey, we got a parking problem. So it's like, no, we do have a parking problem, but it's not a lack of parking, and we'll explain that. But anyway, single-use development on the edge today, effectively, the thin edge in any community, in any part of America, not just the one we're in, but any place in America, the thin edge does not produce enough revenue through taxes to pay for all the infrastructure that supports it. Doesn't cover the arterial and the roads and the sewer, the water, the police, the fire, the garbage. And in North Dakota, it does not definitely cover the snowplow or the new snowplow. So we have a economic issue which we don't know, because growth is covering up. The growth of the new growth, and the new money from the new growth is covering up the fact that we've got shortfalls occurring by our pattern of development. So the first graph that I want to show you, if this is where class really begins here, is about smart, efficient infrastructure. And we want to be working in that upper right-hand quadrant. We want to get a high return, a positive high ROI on the taxpayer dollars. And this involves a ratio. Joe Mizzaconi will talk about it. In his data he will show you today. The assessed value of a project is the numerator, and the acres is the bottom. So value per acre. The acre is a proxy because infrastructure is around linear feet. And I say linear because most infrastructure is in the ground. The sewer, the water, the sidewalk, the electricity to run those light poles. And then that distance, that linear feet, is also the thing that drives how far a snowplow driver's got to go, an ambulance driver, a police. All of the effects of city employees are also affected by how far and the distances. And so again, it's a efficiency measure that we have. And all of us, I know, in our own lives want to be efficient, but we have to understand that we have to support our leaders that are running our park districts and our school districts and our cities and our counties, to make sure that they also understand and know that if we want lower property taxes, it starts with how we design our cities. Conversely, in the lower side of the lower left-hand quadrant, because in this 4-box matrix, there's 2 types of development you can do roughly. You can either do infill, which is you move capital to where there's existing infrastructure, Or you can do greenfield, which is you take the dirt on the edge of any of our communities, and then you go build out there. And then there's two types of capital. There's public funding, and there's private capital. And Chuck Marone will talk about the ratios that a healthy city may need, a strong town, between how much private capital do you have for every dollar of public. When cities were starting, when a railroad came to North Dakota and said, hey, here's our station and we're going to start right here in the railroad, and then people across the street, built the first multi-story. Even in those days, they built multi-story. It was a 2-story building. Even in my little hometown of Arthur, when the railroad came through in 1883, the first building across the street was a hardware store, and there was some boarding rooms above it, and then the family lived there because they didn't have to build more infrastructure. It was a mixed use. It was residential, it was retail, and it was also a hotel on one lot using the same infrastructure. So mixed use on a small footprint. That made sense. It didn't require a big, let's raise a lot of taxes to build sewer and water and roads. And so the cities built organically in a smart way. The opposite of that is today, when we've got boatloads of cash coming in because of in a growing community, the values of everybody's home goes up, and as the values go up, nobody even has to raise the mill levels. They don't have to raise taxes on a percentage basis to have more cash come in the door, because and then we take that cash, those public dollars, and then we decide we're going to go spend those generally on the edge to build new schools, new parks, and new things on the edge. And then when the public dollars go in first and the private capital comes later, both if the ratio's wrong and if the timing's wrong. If public capital goes in first, tough for all of us as taxpayers to make money on that, because we have to wait for all of it to fill in around there to get that ratio back between private and public. And by the time it does, in some cases, it doesn't pay. Here's an example that I could show at anywhere across the whole state, which is, this is a northeastern Bismarck Sunrise Elementary School. The school board buys, in quotes, cheap land on the edge. They get enticed by a developer. Maybe somebody donates the land on the edge, and then they go out and they build the elementary school. They have to build it with big parking lots because they're not walkable neighborhoods. Every elementary kids don't drive, but every parent now has got to drive their kid to get to the school because you can't walk to it and you can't ride your bike to it. This is better. This is an 11. There have been many times in the last decade where elementary schools built in North Dakota on the edge had a 0 walk score. To get a 0, then you have to just build something that's more than 1 mile away from any other possible thing that you could do a transaction in. That's how you get to a 0 walk score, because the walk score algorithm, which has been proven out through research, and it's available to all of you free. You can go to walkscore.com. If you've never been to walkscore.com, if you've never looked up the walk score of your own home, your own business, your own community, please do. They've got capability for professionals and for designers and for city planners. So they've got a great set of tools that are out there, but a lot of this stuff is just free. Just plug in your own address. It gives you the walk score, it'll give you a bike score, it'll give you a transit score. So there's tools that didn't exist 10 years ago, which are actually fantastic. But on this walk score, this development on the edge, that's public dollars. I could say right here in Fargo, when Davies High School was built, where my daughter went, that was a $53 million high school built 2 miles away from everything. It had a 0 walk score when it opened up. There was one road from Fargo, 25th, that got completed the day before school opened. All of the work on that road that down there cost tens of millions of dollars. The Park District, had a pool with a water slide attached to the school. There's a new football field that gets used 5 times a year for football games. There was all of these other, amenities on a big, large 20-acre site that were down there. All totaled, between the city, the Park District, and the school district, there was more than $100 million that were put into that development. And on the day it opened, there wasn't a single house anywhere near it. So that's public dollars going in, private dollars coming years later. You can drive there now today, and it's partially filled in. Whether it's Sunrise or whether it's Davies or pick 100 other schools in America, when it all gets filled in, and then you add up the fact that we spent $100 million 10 years ago, and the taxpayers are paying for that, and then we put the development around it. If you put $100 million of development around it, there's no way that that development is going to pay for that thing over the thing. It doesn't work out. So you've got a negative cash flow even when it's finally completed, that the public infrastructure outweighed the private investment. So that's that ratio that we have to keep understanding, that we're building things that are not sustainable financially. And that's hard because this isn't about a lifestyle choice. People can live where they want to, but we have to price things appropriately if we're going to be smart about how we keep building communities for the future. The flip side, I was up in Grand Forks last week, and this is I want to maybe go ahead one more slide and I'll come back. This one was in Grand Forks. This is an illustration, but this opened a couple days ago. The new Hugos. This is like super exciting. Downtown Grand Forks, I went to, there was 11 projects that I was for part of a Main Street visit. I got to get involved with 3 ribbon cuttings and a groundbreaking. Each one of the projects was mixed use. It was infill, meaning there was existing infrastructure with private capital coming on top of that. You know, individually they were all great. Collectively it was fantastic. Major move ahead for Grand Forks. Downtown Grand Forks is going to be a cash generator for Grand Forks City and Grand Forks County and all the things that are happening. But this is remarkable. Nowhere else in the country, the highest form of real estate value in the entire country in the last 5 years has been anything above a Whole Foods. Mixed use, a Whole Foods grocery store underneath. You put offices above it, it sells out. You put residential retail, you put residential apartments above it, it sells out. You put condos above it, it sells out. So if you wanted to have the slam dunk top returning real estate in America, you built above a grocery store. And we keep building grocery stores in America like there's some rule that you can't have a second story above them. When they did, even in my hometown in Arthur, the L&E store had a second story above it. It was built, shortly after the railroad came through. So we finally got one here in North Dakota, Hugo's, which has been in Grand Forks since 1939. Hugo Magnuson was the original founder, along with his wife Dorothy. Their daughters and granddaughters are people that are running this thing today. This thing's got a meat market, it's got a bakery, it's got a bar in the grocery store, of course, Grand Forks. It's got a bar in there. It's got food and beverage. It's got all of these things, 26,000 square feet, and then above it, it's got market rate apartments and affordable hard party. This is like a home run, grand slam type of project, and it was built on a place that had I think they might have torn down some drive-through bank things that weren't being used. These are places, parking lots, old drive-throughs. These are things that don't generate a lot of tax value, but they've got all the infrastructure. So Grand Forks spends no money on new infrastructure, and away you go. And then this will help attract. There's about over 5,200 people that live in downtown Grand Forks now, in the downtown core. They finally have a grocery store. We think of our communities on the size of the whole thing, but in the downtown cores, we're now for the first time having these growing populations. Flip back the slide the other way, and so they say, well, I've used walk scores on these 2 illustrations, 0 to 11, super car dependent on any of the edges. It's not just Sunrise, it's pick any edge in any community in North Dakota, you'll get a low walk score. Pick the downtown area, you'll have a higher walk score, and there's, parts of downtown Fargo that are in the 90s. The 200, 300 block down by the plaza now has hit 97. I think that's the highest you can find in the state. But when you've got walkability, you say, why does it matter? Go look at the walk score data. It raises commercial and retail home values. Communities perform better. It drives better health outcomes. They've got all kinds of research. People that move, from an area of a low walk score to a high walk score and live there for a period of time, their body mass index drops. There's lower obesity in areas with high walk scores. And all of these things are, make a huge difference when we talk about healthy, vibrant communities. And walkability isn't just that, hey, we have a sidewalk in a suburban development. Walkability is their utility. Can you walk to someplace and achieve something that you want to get done in your daily business, like buy something or get groceries or dry cleaning, or get something for your kids or shop or go out to dinner, see a doctor, see a dentist. The utility that we have, think about the number of things that you do in a day that you've got to do on your to-do list, the errands, the appointments. How many of those living in North Dakota can you accomplish by walking versus how many of those can you accomplish by driving? And for many of you, you're living in car-dependent communities, and for many of you, it's probably been a while since you walked to do something, other than walked from a car to go out to dinner. So let's just, again, this is this new eyes. This is not a criticism. We're on a journey. We're learning. We're open. We're humble enough to know that we can learn new things. We're curious about, wow, there's other people that get their daily stuff done and they don't have to get in their car and sit on a cold seat in January. They can actually walk and get some exercise. When they say, well, we're too far north. Well, there's more walkability happening in Winnipeg. There's more people living in Winnipeg than there are in the whole state of North Dakota. And pick any of those northern European cities which are at least as far north as we are, whether it's Copenhagen or Amsterdam or others. I mean, Amsterdam's got more bikes than people. And you say, well, how is that possible? Well, the whole city they've invested not in infrastructure for cars, they prioritize bike lanes. They've got we think of like signal lights at the intersections. Those are designed for cars, and maybe we've got something that if you're really fast, you can scramble across and survive. Try crossing a 7-lane road and now the light turns to walk. I mean, it's terrifying to cross some of these streets that we've built for ourselves here. They are not pedestrian friendly, and you could argue that in some cases they're not even safe. Some of you that have communities that are slowing down traffic and building the bump outs and doing the complete streets work, all of that is starting to tip it back in just a few blocks somewhere in your community that makes it more pedestrian friendly, and the results are magnificent. So walkability is something to think about, bikeability right with it. Let's click ahead 2 slides and talk about the high cost of free parking. I'll just go from memory on Fargo before I got into my current job. We had done an analysis here. There is, just in Fargo alone, there are more than 10, close to 11 parking spots for every automobile that we're owned. And you're like, how is that possible? Well, it's possible because every business, when you have single-use zoning and they're spread out, every restaurant has to have enough parking to meet the peak demand for their restaurant. Well, so does every grocery store. So does every school. Has to have a parking lot big enough for those 5 days when they have the football game. Well, then what about the church that's used just on Sundays and maybe Wednesday night? Well, they got to have enough parking for Easter Sunday. So then everybody builds to their max, and then sometimes in some cities around our country and around our state, we've got parking minimums. Yeah, you can build an apartment building, but only if you've got enough parking, surface parking, for all of the people that live there, which again is, adds additional cost to all of you of taxpayers, particularly if you're putting those in more walkable neighborhoods, because there are unbelievably some people that live in North Dakota that live here and don't own cars. It's a small percentage compared to other places, but not all of them need to have us tell the developer, you've got to have a parking spot for every unit because they may not need it. So you have all of this, and then you say, okay, you own a car, you absolutely need a car, and you've got a ticker on your car that tells you how many miles you drive in a year, and you probably pay attention to that. I think every car ought to have a clock that's based on the number of minutes in a day, the days in a year, and the days in a year, and then that at the end of the year, it would tell you what percentage of the year that you actually use that car. Now, if you live in LA and you've got long commutes, it could be significant. If you live in North Dakota, you utilize that vehicle probably 5% of the available time that you had the car. So you're paying a car payment, and 5% of the time you're actually using it. 95% of the time it's parked, and it's parked someplace. It's probably parked many times on someplace that's got city-paid infrastructure. If it's in a grocery store, a mall parking lot, a church parking lot, a school parking lot, or if it's parked on the street in front of your home and the street is owned by the city, you are parking someplace that's being subsidized by taxpayers because we got free parking. We've decided that, we talk about the streets, and a lot of us talk about the streets here, but the parking takes up way more space. Parking in America, for example, if you added up all the parking in America, it's the size of Connecticut. It's the size of a whole state. Okay, I mean, we as Americans, we love cars so much that the only kind of infrastructure that matters is roads, but the thing that we hate more than anything is we don't have 10 places to park our cars for free. And so that public right of way, that public road is a public good, and then we don't allow ourselves to even price it. We've actually got a state law that says that a city can't charge for parking on a street. And they can charge for parking in a parking ramp, but they can't charge for it on the street because meters are illegal in our state. And of course, meters are a thing of the past, but there are ways with software and apps that you could charge. So we're going to give away the good for free, and then we're going to charge for someone to park in the ramp. And then again, even part of the traffic that we have in downtown areas across our state is people driving around looking for the free spot because they don't want to pay $1 to park in the ramp. So again, part of the way markets work is you can allow pricing to enter back in. So anyway, we've got to look at new eyes at all the parking. When you leave today or driving around, just allow yourself to be shocked by the amount of surface area that we have for parking. And all of that surface area is ringed by infrastructure, sewer, water, roads, lights that you've all paid for, and it's all being underutilized. That is another place where we've got low ROI. The high cost of free parking is public infrastructure with very little revenue coming into it. Okay, next up, 21st century workforce or healthy, vibrant communities. Healthy, vibrant communities are the flip side. This is the place where you do have walkability, where community comes together, you've got financial solvency, and you got amazing citizen experiences. Next. And when we talk about 21st century workforce, again, I'm going to guess the average age in this room is not 18. It's the 18-year-olds that are growing up, this next generation of folks that are going to decide what the future of North Dakota is. They have a whole new, different thing that's going to happen to them. All of us had a mentality where we had to go to where the jobs are. When I graduated from NDSU in 1978, some of the top kids at NDSU got jobs with IBM. And you know where they went to work? They went to work wherever IBM told them to go to work. Might have been Rochester, Minnesota, might have been Rochester, New York, but it was kind of like joining the Army. And people had a mentality post-World War II, which is you would just, get that job and you'd go and you'd work there for 2 years and they'd move you for 2 years. And that was what it was like in the corporate world. Is that happening today? No. If you are a teacher or a nurse and you've got a job that's dependent on being in a location, you can pick any city in America and there's a teaching job open and there's a nursing job open. And then pick any category which requires your presence, and that statement is true. If you were a software engineer or a financial analyst or an engineer and you can work remotely from projects, you can pick your community first, and then you can pick the job second. You can pick where you want to live. And that was true before COVID. COVID just made it more visible to more people that this ability to work remotely exists. So this group of young people that I ran into at UND last weekend, these were all Bismarck seniors. They're up there checking out their colleges. Some of them may go to colleges, some of them may get technical degrees, and some of them could go to UND, and some of them could stay in Bismarck and go to college at Arizona State and never leave Bismarck because of the online options. It's a completely different world. In North Dakota, in September, we had 17,564 jobs available in our state. That was a 38% more, nearly 5,000 more jobs than we had in September last year. And we know that number is chronically and perpetually understated, because if you're Sanford and you've got hundreds and hundreds of nursing positions open, what they do, they don't post 100 positions. They'll post, like 5 different types of nursing jobs, but they've got hundreds open. So these are posted jobs that we have. And if you go out on, Indeed and Career Builder and LinkedIn and all the other places, we know that there's more than double. So we're talking 30 to 35,000 jobs available in our state. That's the same all over the country. We're in a position where we're moving into an era where there's going to be always more jobs available than there are people to fill them. And so the way we compete for workforce, the way we do economic development is not about creating jobs, it's about creating communities that attract the talent and attract the 21st century workforce. If all of our high school graduates in the state and all of our college graduates in the state decided at the end of this coming school year that they were going to stay in North Dakota and take a job here, which they won't, if all of them did, we still wouldn't have enough graduates to fill the job. So then what we need is we've got to have what we had the last decade. We have to have net in-migration. And net in-migration, we were fortunate, as Sean mentioned the opening, that we're the 4th fastest growing state in the nation. McKinsey County was #1 in the country, #1 county in the country on percentage growth. Williams County, home of McKinsey, home of Watford City. Williams County, home of Williston, 2nd fastest growing county by percentage basis in the country, so #1 and #2 in North Dakota. But here we are in Cass County. This was another really fast growing county. We have a huge number of jobs open here. Most number of jobs in the state open in Cass County. Most number of manufacturing jobs open in Cass County. And so, you know, people here understand growth, and people understand this chart is exciting because just before this chart that started going up in around 2008, 2009, there was a point there around 2005 where we were the only state in the nation that between 1930 and 2005, 75-year stretch, we were the only state that had lower population in 2005 than 1930. And all I can say about that is I was here, it was a team effort. Okay. We got it done. Okay, anyway, but now we're going the other way. And we added 100,000 people in a decade. We need to add another 100,000 in this decade. Our state's on track. We should be thinking about, we should be planning, how do we build financially solvent cities? How do we get to 1 million people without increasing our footprint? Because if we get the people to move here, and we utilize our parking lots and our infill and our spaces and our existing infrastructure, we can build ourselves back to having really, really great cities that are financially solvent, that are gonna have low property taxes and incredible amenities because we won't be spending them on infrastructure on the edge. We can spend them on amenities that will help us attract this workforce. This workforce is not gonna move to our communities because we have one more overpass over the interstate that might cost $70 million. They're not gonna move to our communities because we have one more big box retailer that, by the way, those models are all under threat. They're not gonna move here because we have one more fast food drive-in with a drive-through. That's not why they move to places. Talk to any of the employers in your communities. Ask them why people move here. Ask them why students from our schools that are here at Concordia and Morehead State and the tech schools at NDSU and in our 11 universities around the state, talk to college students and ask them why they would pick a city. We have to build cities for the next generation as opposed to the build us. If part of you is saying, yeah, he's talking, but I'm not giving up my car and I love living in my single-use neighborhood, that's fine for you. I mean, there's no judging here. But if your job is part of the designing a future to help North Dakota grow in the future, then it doesn't matter what all of us want, it matters what the next generation wants. And we've got to listen to them, and we got to build communities, and we have to build communities and how do we attract? So how do you attract communities? You do it with differentiation. The differentiation is that we have to have things that are different and more attractive than everybody else. And I think communities yourself, if we can go to the next slide, the communities that are here, when you're thinking about it, if I can say, you know, do we spend the money on a undifferentiated arterial road or a road or something on the edge, you know, one more strip mall, one more this, one more that, or do we do something where we create body heat and energy and differentiation, the kind of thing that would get on the front page of a national paper? If we do that with our extra public dollars, then for sure we'll have differentiation. So again, when you're thinking about a community, it's not about being the same, it's about being different. Each community can do things differently, so let's think about that differentiation. And we're committed to helping with that, which is why with Accelerate ND, which Lieutenant Governor Brent Sanford and I announced I guess just over a week ago, which is ideas about how to invest the ARPA dollars. And we're in such incredible shape in North Dakota because we're in better position than everybody else. Governors have talked to other governors at more time in the history of our republic during the pandemic than any other time. I've had an opportunity weekly for a year and a half to kind of be in touch with other governors and what they're doing. And of course, when you get outside of the core Midwest, Lots of places had their economy shut down for over a year. There's places in the nation where kids have been out of school for 450 days, and their forward momentum stopped, and they're using the ARPA dollars just as replacement dollars to replace lost general government income. In North Dakota, with the great work of all of our entrepreneurs and everybody else, by and large, over this whole thing, we've stayed open. We've had in-person education. We've continued to have our economy moving forward, both energy, ag, technology, UAS, et cetera. We're poised to leap ahead of all the other states if we act strategically. And then, sometimes we, as North Dakotans, partly because we went through 75 years of shrinking, 75 years of people saying, wow, I've been living here my whole life, people that were born after 1930, like I was, and lived here till 2005, all we ever saw was declining population. I get why you could end up with elected leaders across the state that say, look, I'm from North Dakota, I know what's going on, which is, it's scarcity, it is downhill, my town is dying. But we have to look at the data. We're growing, we're financially as strong as we've ever been, and this is an opportunity for us to invest in smart ways to help us go forward. But it's going to take us culturally to get out of this hunker down, worry about the next thing, because we have already saved for a rainy day. And so let's talk a little bit about Accelerate ND and why we would want to act right now. Well, one of the first reasons we want to act right now is because we've got $1 billion in federal dollars sitting in the Bank of North Dakota. It's earning 0.07%, basically nothing, and we have inflation coming our way. Federal government can't keep printing trillions of dollars and not expect that we're going to have inflation, and they can't print those dollars and encourage all the states, all the cities, all the counties, all K-12, all higher ed, and all healthcare, because there's separate streams of money getting pushed on all those to get that money and spend that money and stimulate the economy and not have costs go up. And one of the places where costs will go up, it'll go up for labor. We're seeing that. People are competing for scarce labor. It'll also go up for construction costs. We've also got supply chain interruptions. So hard to imagine that we're going to not have inflation. But if the legislature acts now and gets this money out and going, we can bid construction this winter, and we can start doing the infrastructure and building work next summer. We can start working on things like career and technical education, which we need. So anyway, we want to retain workers, support local businesses, we want to avoid inflation, and then we also know that as we've sorted through billions of dollars of requests to come up with the recommendations we've sorted those based on return on investment for you. What's the highest return on investment for taxpayers? If we can spend a federal dollar, not your taxpayer dollars, but a federal dollar that comes in, if we can spend it, match it with one-to-one with the private sector, we can get 100% return on day one, and it also solves an important need like career and technical education. So we've got all of these great ideas. We think it's smart to invest right now. We think it's fiscally sound to do that. But if we flip to the next, if we keep going here, and we say, shouldn't we save for a rainy day? Well, that you're going to hear that. You might hear it today. You might hear it from the legislature. A few in the legislature might say that. But let's understand, budget stabilization has got a legislative maximum of $749 million. We have rebuilt that from almost zero 4 years ago. It's at its maximum. You can't put legally another dollar into that fund. It just bounces off of that and flows into an ending balance or flows into the Strategic and Investments and Improvement Fund, which has got $822 million in it. There's 567 of that that's unobligated. Where is that money sitting, the 750 and the 567? At the Bank of North Dakota, earning 0.07%. Okay. Then on top of that, third bucket, ending fund balance. Because we smartly used federal dollars last year, because we had lower cost, because state employees weren't traveling, because we had super high performance returns on the legacy fund, all of those things combined to have an ending fund balance of $1.1 billion. That's, call it a surplus, call it an ending balance, but we finished a 2-year biennium with $1.1 billion in cash more. We had planned on being at $700 million. We had $407 million more than that. And we think that some of that should be given back to the citizens. But anyway, you take all these things up in the state of North Dakota, separate from the federal dollars, we got $2 billion in cash, underutilized, another $1 billion from the feds, $3 billion. Would make sense to invest a portion of that right now and get the state moving forward. So then with our plan, on the ARPA plan, was spend most of this on workforce and economic development, all the things we've been talking about, infrastructure and capital improvements, that's the green portion of this slide, and then a smaller portion, which again would fit into more of the healthy, vibrant communities, which is emergency response, healthcare, behavioral health, citizen service efficiency, and all the things to make government more efficient. But this is a really sound, high ROI plan. We released it a couple weeks ago and have sent it off to the legislature, who's starting to convene today. But things that are in this thing under the workforce development piece, workforce innovation and attraction grants, which go out to you locally. I know we've got the conference coming up the next couple days, but putting dollars in your ability to do that on a regional level, polytechnic centers, private-public partnerships around childcare, $70 million for the career academies that would be built around the state with a one-to-one match, economic development, natural gas infrastructure, bioscience grants, more money for Grand Sky, more money for autonomous agriculture, hydrogen development grants. I mean, the good stuff that is in this proposal is just flowing over, and I tell you, every one of these things has got high return on investment. In terms of smart, efficient infrastructure, the money that's in there for the DOT funding, there's water infrastructure, and again, healthy, vibrant communities, dollars for tourism, rural housing support, big chunks of dollars to improve our deferred maintenance and all the repairs we need to make at our 13 state parks and recreation, which are great assets to work with Main Street, with local communities, because each of those parks affects the communities that are near them. So anyway, fabulous plan that we have put in place, that we've put out there. But when we take a look at the DOT, other things that they're doing outside of ARPA, there's work going on there. Bill and his team are increasing the annual investment in the urban and non-urban roads program from 11.3 to 15.3. This is the kind of work that was done that we saw last night, that Bernie and the leaders showed us last night down on Cheyenne. Slow traffic, build bump outs, wider sidewalks for sidewalk dining, ties in with all the events and plaza work that's going on. When you do that, it raises the retail sales of the people that are there. It raises the attractiveness, it raises the property values, it attracts more infill development, you attract more infill development on infrastructure, and then you got examples like that where you took a space that had about $1.6 million of property value over a few blocks. Now it's $28 million, and so you've got a 14, 15xer increase in terms of that ratio between numerator and denominator, which really drives great outcomes. So, way to go, West Fargo, and way to go, DOT, because again, working together. Bernie said it last night, these things have to work together in collaboration. But if you're here from a city, make sure, if you don't know Bill, get to know Bill and his team. We're here to help support you get projects like this done. And then there's other complete street projects, which is another federal program, which again, DOT is going to be there to help support you in putting together these applications for complete streets. Next. Main Street visits, many of you participated when we were around the state. They got sidelined during the pandemic. We're going to be kickstarting those again. We got our first one out of the blocks, the fantastic one in Grand Forks last week. But again, when we come to your community, if you want us to come, invite us. But we love meeting with people from, mayor, city council, park boards, school districts, students, hospital and clinic officials, the biggest employers in town. But key has to be students there. We don't come and do Main Street visits unless there's students there talking about your community and how they fit into that. And so again, it's time to bring those things back. We look forward to doing that. We had kind of a mini one yesterday for a few hours here in West Fargo. That was fantastic. But we're excited about getting that going again. A few slides there from all the great work going on. That's the Hugos that I was getting ready to open days away. There's a new street project of Mayor Brandon Boczynski, who's doing a fantastic job in Grand Forks, working up there, and some great economic development projects happening in downtown Grand Forks. Next up, again, more Main Street. I think, again, I'll put in a plug there on that last one, upper left-hand corner. If you ever dreamed of having a stake in a 1930s speakeasy, Hal Gershman built a Harry's Steakhouse. It's just opening in Grand Forks, named it after his father. That thing is magnificent and beautiful. And if you're have parents that love to go out for a steak and restaurants are too noisy, it's the first restaurant I know in North Dakota where they've installed sound dampening equipment in every booth and in the ceiling, and so you can actually hear the people that are there. And so again, that's I told him, I said, you know, why am I talking about a steakhouse? If you're trying to attract a doctor to come to work at the UND Medical School or at Altru, if you're trying to get a software engineer, if you're trying to get a professor to UND, if you're trying to get somebody who's going to work at the Simplot or the new corn milling plant, you know where they're going to take them to recruit them? They're going to take them to dinner at Harry's. We're going to close economic development deals, and they're going to be closing workforce deals, and families will move here because they're going to be like, wow, this is a cool community. That's a differentiated amenity. And that can happen in the downtown core when we do smart things, and then you attract the capital. So anyway, way to go, Hal. Great shot from Watford City up there. Great turnout with the Lieutenant Governor in his hometown. That was a mixed-use infill project in Main Street in Watford. And so again, I want to say, as I close out here, I want to say a few thank yous. Economic Development Association of North Dakota Planning Association, know you've got your days coming up in the days ahead here. Thank you for teaming up with us. We know that there are a number of you that are here that are planning on attending that. And we again want to say thank you to all of you. I want to retouch on the challenge that I put out for all of you this morning. This is an opportunity between the keynotes and the breakouts to learn best practices. You have a chance to network in person and to build resources and connections. And I want you also to leave here inspired to make change. That one action item, that's the most important thing. You take an action item from MSI. We will be sending a follow-up email to all attendees who registered to ask you if you have taken action on your one action, because this is how we can take this conference and move things forward. Again, I want to thank all of our partners across the state. We've got 70 plus communities across the state that are part of this network of Main Street Initiative. These are all places that either passed initiatives or at the city commission level and others and said, hey, we want to be part of this thing. The ones that are highlighted in yellow here, we're going to have an opportunity to recognize them this afternoon. And so again, we'll have Lisbon, Milner, Hettinger, Devils Lake, Grand Forks, Botno, and Bowman, all with award-winning Main Street projects across a number of different categories: healthy, vibrant communities, the arts, economic development, and workforce. Those are all best practices. So if you're here for this afternoon for the awards or tune in from that, learn about the great work that people are working on. And again, as I saw yesterday in meetings in West Fargo, as I saw in Grand Forks last week, as I've seen in every MSI thing, we have to remember how special North Dakota is. Why is North Dakota special? North Dakota is special because we can get people in a room like we did yesterday. We had state leaders, people from the Senate and the House, leaders at the state level. We had elected mayors. We had county commissioners. We had park district leaders. We have nonprofits, schools, hospitals, park districts, everybody coming together, business leaders from the private sector. We are willing to all sit down and talk to each other in North Dakota. We all have the opportunity, as I saw in Grand Forks last week and in West Fargo yesterday. You can get everybody in a community all rowing in the same direction, just like they have in these award-winning communities. That is unique. It is totally unique. We get higher ed and K-12 and the business community saying, how can we do a better job on career and technical education? How can the private sector, we're going to see the private sector raise $70 million to match $70 million from the state in the next few months when the legislature affirms the $70 million for the CTE when they come back. This is how we all pull together. So we just have to always bring gratitude every day to what we do, because we live in a special place. We have an opportunity to do things for all the citizens to make this place really, really, really special. So in closing, I just want to again close with gratitude for all of you. Thanks for listening this morning. Thanks for being here. Thanks for generating an action item. Thanks for for taking notes and taking best practices from the three amazing keynoters. Thanks for participating this afternoon in the breakouts. And most of all, thanks for your leadership at home. Thanks for leaving here and going back and being a force of positive change in your communities, because we know that North Dakotans, we've got the grit, we've got the hard work, we can overcome problems, we roll up our sleeves and we do all that, but we're standing on a place today not of scarcity. We're standing on a place of abundance. We've financially never been stronger. We've got, our population is growing. We're looking at record economic deals. This is the time now for us to say, to look hard at our pattern of development and say, is it helping us solve our biggest problem, workforce, or is it creating a problem? Is our pattern of development creating a problem, which is creating a financial burden on those future generations? We have an opportunity now to stop and take a breath in this moment of abundance and say we can start turning the ship towards cities that are more financially resilient and more financially stable. And in the process, we'll attract more workforce, we'll build more healthy, vibrant communities, we'll attract the economic development diversification, and the future of our state will be even brighter. Thank you very much. Main Street attendees, you're fantastic. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you, Governor. Very inspiring.
Thank you. I hope